You know that moment when you're in a social setting, you spot someone you'd love to talk to, but you freeze? Your mind tells you to just say something, anything, but your body won't cooperate. And then that familiar inner voice creeps in, whispering that you're weird, that you'll say something stupid, that no one wants to hear what you have to say. So once again, you choose silence. If you think you have nothing to say, it's not your fault. It's because you were always made to feel invisible. I know how that feels because I've been there too. But after getting tired of living in fear of expressing myself, I discovered some powerful techniques that completely changed the game for me. If this resonates with you, drop a comment right now. I'm done staying silent. And stick around, because what I'm about to share could radically transform the way you connect with the world around you. I remember exactly when I started going quiet. I was 14, sitting in a group of classmates, and I decided to share an idea. No one responded. One of them looked at me, laughed, and said I was way too weird for this kind of conversation. It felt like a punch to the chest. From that day on, every time I thought about speaking up, something inside me would shut down. It was like my mind was trying to protect me, telling me it was safer to stay quiet because no one really wanted to hear what I had to say. But the most damaging part wasn't what that person said. It was the silence that followed. No one stood up for me. No one acknowledged my effort. And that's where the block is born. It's not always what people say that wounds you, but what they don't say. The lack of support, the judgmental stares, that crushing feeling of being alone the moment you try to express yourself. That builds a kind of internal censorship so powerful that over time you just stop trying. And this isn't just being sensitive. There's science behind it. Dr. Matthew Lieberman, a social neuroscientist at UCLA, found that the human brain reacts to social rejection the same way it responds to physical pain. In other words, when you feel excluded or like you don't belong, your body literally interprets it as a threat, like you've been hurt. To protect itself from that pain, your brain activates a defense mechanism, silence. But here's the thing, that silence doesn't heal you. It only hides you. So if I want to ask you, genuinely, can you remember when you started holding back? Who made you feel like your voice was too much? When did you stop starting conversations because you thought you were too weird? Write that moment down, because recognizing when it all began is the first step toward reclaiming your confidence. The 6 practical techniques that started changing everything for me. The first thing I did was simple, but incredibly freeing. I grabbed my phone, opened the front camera, and started recording short videos, just talking to myself. Not for posting, just to practice. I'd talk about my day, something that was bothering me, or something I'd always wanted to say to someone, but never had the courage to. At first, it felt awkward, but after a week, I started hearing my own voice with more compassion. I stopped criticizing every sentence. That's when I realized the problem wasn't what I was saying, but how I was judging myself every time I spoke. This technique is inspired by self-observation practices in humanistic psychology. It's simple, practical, and transformative. The second technique became a daily habit I adapted from cognitive behavioral therapy. I picked a short affirmation and started repeating it every day in front of the mirror, looking myself in the eyes. The phrase was, I have the right to express myself, even if I'm afraid. At first, it felt like just words. But over time, it became an internal code. I'd leave the house with that phrase echoing in my mind, and almost automatically, I started speaking up more, starting small conversations without overthinking. It's like reprogramming your brain with new instructions. Repetition builds familiarity, and familiarity builds confidence. The third technique took the most courage. It's called progressive exposure, and it's widely used in behavioral psychology. I made a list of situations that made me uncomfortable and began facing them, one by one, at my own pace. One day, I'd compliment someone in the elevator. The next, I'd strike up a short conversation with someone in line at the store. Then I started asking questions during meetings at work. The key wasn't perfection, it was consistency. Each small interaction sent a new message to my brain, you made it through. And that repetition slowly chipped away at the fear until starting conversations began to feel natural. The fourth technique completely shifted how I approached social interactions. I call it response scenarios. Here's how it works before going into any social setting. I'd imagine 3 possible responses someone might give if I started a conversation. 1 positive, 1 neutral, and 1 negative. This trained my brain not to overreact if things didn't go perfectly. Research shows that when the brain anticipates discomfort with awareness, it responds with less fear. It's like training your mind to say, even if this doesn't go well, I can handle it. The 5th technique, one I still use today, is something I call a release signal. I chose a small, discreet gesture, in my case, gently pressing my fingers together, that became a physical trigger to interrupt self-sabotaging thoughts. Whenever I notice myself holding back out of insecurity, I use that gesture as a reminder I have a choice. It may seem small, but physical anchoring like this is used in behavioral psychology to link specific actions with positive responses. Over time, that gesture became an invisible push that helps me act, even when my mind wants to shut down. And the sixth technique might sound obvious, but most people don't do it. Prepare talking points in advance. That doesn't make you fake, it makes you smart. I started jotting down simple conversation starters on my phone, movies I watched, interesting things I read, good icebreaker questions. So when the chance to connect came up, I wasn't stuck trying to improvise, I had something ready to go. The truth is, starting conversations isn't a talent. It's a skill. And the more you prepare, the more confident you feel going into any interaction, without the fear of freezing up. These techniques were the turning point for me. That they're not magic, but they're real. And anyone can start using them today with what they have, right where they are. Because the goal isn't to become an extrovert. It's to reclaim your freedom to express yourself without feeling ashamed of simply existing. For a long time, I thought the problem was me, my personality. I was too intense, too quiet, interested in things nobody else cared about. And I started using that as an excuse to hide. But what I've come to learn is this: the problem was never being different. The real problem was believing that, in order to be accepted, I had to shape myself into what other people expected. And slowly, that belief made me think that starting conversations was something only normal people were allowed to do. But here's the truth: that kind of normal doesn't exist. So many amazing people spend their whole lives hiding behind the belief that they're too weird to truly connect, and that belief becomes a kind of invisible prison. But listen, you don't have to be perfect. You don't need to be charismatic. You don't need to say the right thing all the time. You just need to stop censoring yourself. Because real connection doesn't come from saying the perfect words. It comes from why you're speaking in the first place. When someone senses that you're being genuine, imperfect, and real, they feel safe with you. True charisma is born from authenticity, not performance. So here's a question I want to leave you with, one that might sting a little, but could also set you free. When did you decide that the way you were was a problem? Who made you believe that starting conversation was a threat, not a bridge? Write that down somewhere. Look that belief in the eye. Because the moment you face the lie that you're too weird is the moment you start breaking free from it. If you've made it this far, it's because deep down, you already know there's so much inside you waiting to be heard. And maybe for the first time in a long time, you're ready to let that voice come through. It doesn't matter how long you've been silent or how many times you felt like you didn't belong. What matters is what you choose to do with what you've heard today. You don't have to carry this weight alone anymore. These techniques work, not because they give you something new, but because they help you awaken what was always yours, your voice, your presence, your ability to connect. Drop a comment right now and make that commitment to yourself. I won't hide anymore. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this right now, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Because this space is for people who are tired of living in silence, and who are ready to learn how to speak their truth with real courage. And my friend, this is just the beginning.